Hello there, and as usual, I'm Aaron from Last Stand Gamers, and today I want to discuss something with you that I find quite important. Now, the topic of today's discussion is more of a survival sort of orientation, and it's surviving with the bare minimum, or what some of you like to call it, the caveman approach. And I thought I would discuss, or just give you a few tips and tricks on how to survive with the minimum, or start with the minimum as well. Now, as many of you guys want to do, you want to venture out into the world. If you're starting on a planet, it's a hell of a lot easier. You've got one of the key resources for human survival, and that is oxygen, and it's completely around you at all times. You can take your helmet off, and you can literally walk around all day without having any survival problems. Now, the first thing you're going to bump into is when you come to start building. Now, everything in Space Engineers requires components, and before they require components, they require resources to be mined. Now, if I go ahead and start mining somewhere down here, I have nowhere to put that ore into, so I require a refinery. Now, the only problem with a refinery is if we head down here and we put our welder over it, the refinery actually requires components. So you can't start with nothing. It's impossible to start with nothing in Space Engineers, and that's one of the features that I really wanted to say. The minimum start is a refinery and an assembler, because even if you do refine the ore at this stage, you can't produce any components because the assembler itself requires components to actually be produced. So the minimum start requirements are a refinery and an assembler. Now, depending on what planet you're on, this is going to vary quite considerably. Now, we'll head up into space and I'll show you what you need to start in space. So moving on to the Caveman Star in space. Now, this is the minimum requirements once again. We've got ourselves a refinery and assembler just like on planets. Now, remember to put your reactor in. I think I forgot to mention that down on the planet surface. Without that, these machines won't work. Now, the problem, unlike a planet, it's a race against time up in space, because you've got that third element. You've got oxygen that you now need to take consideration of, and there's no oxygen out here at all. So that's going to start depleting, and you've got between 10 and 20 minutes to really sort that out. So the first thing you're going to want to get working on is some sort of oxygen system. So if we just type in oxygen here to our search bar, you can see we've got some different oxygen options. We've got the generator, and we also have the oxygen farm. That is a great way of just an early start, but you're not going to really have enough just by using one of these. You're going to want to place a minimum of 3 or 4 so you can produce enough oxygen for yourself. You could also go down the route of the ice generator using this. You'd have to find some ice first, and the big problem with this is you might use up a lot of hydrogen trying to find the ice, so it's always best, in my opinion, to go with a solar sort of start, but we'll stick one of them in anyway just to demonstrate that. We can actually add 2 of them solar devices on top. Now, like I said, the next part, it's a little bit of a knock-on effect. You're going to need yourself some hydrogen, and the only way you're going to be able to do this is get that generator to actually convert it by whacking it in the hydrogen little capsule here. So if we add that to the end, we can actually get ourselves some really simple hydrogen bottles going. That's going to allow us to build and expand a lot further. So now we're at this stage, we've reached a pretty much stable level. The only problem is we can't recharge, and we're using up hydrogen just hovering. So once again, another knock-on effect. This is going to force us to build a gravity generator so we can actually walk around on this station or do whatever we want to conserve energy and power. Now, the problem with this, with power and energy as well, the more grinding you do, the more welding, using the tools, the more power you're going to consume. But you need some way of charging up. So that means you have to build yourself a med bay. Otherwise, your power will just deplete and you won't be able to use anything at all. So we'll just stick a med bay in that we can actually recharge at. Now, we could recharge alternatively by putting a seat in or putting some sort of cockpit here. And it depends on how much you want to actually spend. So if you look here, this is what a medical room requires. And if I get myself a cockpit side by side, you can actually see that a cockpit, between them, they're pretty similar. This one requires more steel tubes, but this one requires computers and displays. Let's have a look. Yeah, we've got displays, computers in this one. We've got more computers in this one. So the comparison is, I would probably build a cockpit for basic survival sort of terms, and you can even hook this up to your oxygen tank as well, so you have a way of recharging, but you could get the bottles in that case. There's a lot of different ways once you've got that basic refinery and assembler, and I just really wanted to discuss this with you today. Now, we could talk about moving to an alien planet or another one of the planets without a proper atmosphere, so let's head over there now. So we finally came down to the alien planet, and in my opinion, it's probably one of the hardest environments to actually survive in. Space has its challenges, but this planet has hordes and hordes of bugs that love to destroy everything, and in some cases they'll come up through the floor and destroy all your equipment by bugging underneath. You can even see they're starting to dig up underneath the actual structure here themselves, and they'll either pop up through the floor, or there you go, exactly. So a big problem we're going to have to deal with is keep our material safe, and a quick way of doing this is actually leave it on a raised platform. but we've just only started our survival. There's a lot of things we need on this planet to actually survive. We're going to need the oxygen. So the first thing we can actually do to get that oxygen is we can get a standard vent like this, and we can attach it to the side. So we'll stick that vent on, and instead of using it in its standard configuration, we can go over, press K, and we can use it to actually depressurize. And by using it on depressurize, it'll suck oxygen in that low oxygen environment outside, and it'll actually start storing it with an oxygen tank. So that's the next thing we're going to have to build. So we'll whack ourselves an oxygen tank down. Let me just find the oxygen tank. There we go. So by sticking one of them down and getting it connected up if possible, so we'll just remove our power for the moment, and we can always stick another power generator back in. So we'll move that, we've connected that up, and we'll add ourselves a reactor back in. So by doing this, we've actually got oxygen, and we can actually live here quite sustainably for a long time. We've not got hydrogen yet, but on planets, if you're happy with walking everywhere, hydrogen is not necessarily important. So that's all you really need for your bare bones survival. Once you've reached this stage, you will be self-sufficient for quite some time. And you can even add more air vents in to actually pull more oxygen out of that low oxygen environment. But anyway, I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and starting with a caveman sort of star is a very challenging experience. Just leaving yourself an assembler, a reactor with limited uranium in, and a refinery out in a plane, and then trying to start survival rather than one of the easy start bases is something that is quite an achievement if you succeed within the first 2 or 3 attempts. Anyway, give it a go and let me know how your survivals turn out. Anyway, I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.